Thank you so much, Zia. It's such an important thing to note that all of our struggles, the conversation is really intersectional. It's important to remember that and to keep in mind that it's impossible to focus on one area of anything without thinking about the fact that there are people who sometimes exist outside what we like to call the mainstream, who are affected in larger or very different degrees by things that we call normal. And I'm looking forward to our first panel because we're going to really go into that. But before then, we'll go to our keynote address, our keynote speech, and it's going to be given by Barrister Israel Usman, who's the managing partner for Classfield Solicitors. He's a legal practitioner, he's an arbitrator, and he's a mediator. He has 34 years of active experience in legal practice, and his litigation experience includes trial and appellate courts as well as the ECOWAS court. So a very wide scope, which is not to say that it's going to be a boring conversation. I think it's going to be very interesting. He has some slides, and he would like us to follow the conversation as he's discussing it with us. So please go into your browsers and type in bit.ly/symposium slides. bit.ly/symposium slides. And that has his entire outline there so that we can follow visually as he's speaking to us. So can we have a round of applause as we welcome Barrister Israel Usman. Is everybody on? Does everybody need any?
I feel a bit cold. Since we don't have some kind of program, I'm very sick and and I'm hoping that people will. It's okay, I can manage. But thanks for inviting me. I think it's a topic that most people should be concerned about, but not many people talk about, maybe as a group. And it's not something we talk about individually. There are things that I can say here, but which will not be nice, or rather which will not be, should I say, proper because of being make some things public. It then means that there are some things that I want to say that if I say it, those who are listening will know what to do about it. So it's better to keep some things in-house among ourselves after the public discourse we can. For example, I would ask, if a policeman points a gun at you unarmed, you have the right to defend yourself. Right? Yes. Okay. There are some things, that's kind of thing I'm talking about. But there are some things I can say which will tend to mean inciting violence, which is not really so. But there are things that we can keep among ourselves for measures that we can take when things happen. Now, the topic is moving beyond the clampdown. We had this live event at Symposium. You can take it back to some other similar events. The one I didn't mention in my paper is Tiananmen Square in 1989 in China. It was very similar. In fact, we were following it on CNN. This was a group of young people, quite a large number. If you know what China is, you can imagine the number of people, young people protesting for rights. And it was the army using tanks, armored battle tanks, to clamp down. 6th of June, 1989. We celebrate it every year. Nigeria is borrowing some points on that from China. It's getting bad. It's getting worse. But if you had asked the police to come in, it's a different thing. But when you ask the army to step in, to come and shoot blank bullets, some things are just not logical. So there are some things that I'll probably thing. Let's just look at the slides if you have access to them. For use of reference, I think this is slide 4, where I talked about some of the global events. The recent ones that we know of are the Black Lives Matter in the US, and also what is happening in Hong Kong currently. And if you also follow the profile of what is happening in Hong Kong, you know that Nigeria is following the same script. In Hong Kong, they have what they call the security laws. All of these laws, all of these processes are all intended for clampdowns. All of them. If you also notice recently, the CBN went to court to close down some accounts. The word they used was terrorism. We have a Terrorism Prevention Act. You need to look at that act and know how drastic and draconian it is. So we're actually in a bad place at the moment. We just don't seem to realize the excitement of the physical events and should I say the loss of lives. But it's really, really bad. This one I've requested rather that we have some good discussions to define some things. What are human rights? We need to really focus on what human rights are, what they are not. For example, if you're dealing with labor rights, human rights, you deal with that. At what point do you bring in people like NLC? Or at what point do you accommodate NLC in your program? And I say this because we tend to confuse those who destabilize human rights with those who work for other human rights, or for other kind of forms of rights, so to say. And we find that human rights is not necessarily about maybe physical life, it's about humanity. At the core of it is humanity. Every event in life is about humanity. And that is all being taken away. I talk about the brazen profile, what we are seeing today. Why I use the word brazen is because they don't care what you say, they don't care what you think, they don't care whether it's right or wrong. It's brazen. If you know, for example, that I listen to the Gbv say that they should protect themselves. That is was indirectly an order to shoot. Face any such, just shoot. I listened to the army say something like they will not allow it to happen again. It's also an order to shoot. They don't care anymore. I also talked about some of the, when I came, I asked about the audience demographics. Obviously, there are younger people here. I've added a few things about the younger generation. For example, you have more marketing power to influence things. You are more in number than them, so to say. When I say that, I say this because it still needs to be organized. If you have students who are saying something and then the human rights organization is saying something, then you have a problem. But here we are. The law does not matter. The constitution does not matter. The judicial process does not matter. The public officer, the security officer, the law enforcement officer assume that it's above the law. We're not talking about what he can do and undo. From small things like just obeying traffic lights, he does not think he needs to stop for red lights. Not to talk about human life. The same thing, a rich man is practically above the law in Nigeria. Minority interest is also either pushed or neglected or ignored. We have some new developments like this issue of fake news. If you ask me what fake news is today, I don't know what it is, because the definition that the government gives is different from our own idea of what fake news is. I don't know what hate speech is, but it's there. I don't know what national interest is anymore, because national interest will mean the interest of the person at the top. don't know what national security is anymore. The definition of national security is so fluid that, that's in Nigeria's context, that anything that embarrasses, and I use the word embarrass, embarrasses, say, a governor, is national security. In fact, the new NBC code says specifically that if you say anything that embarrasses government, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. It's punishable or can be met with sanction. We have denial of access to records, we have manipulation we have planting of dissent. It's something you need to watch out for. Believe me, whether you like it or not, SSS is either listening to you here, or watching you, or has sent some people to watch what is being done. And don't ignore this thing. If you didn't know it before, please just know it. That's what they do. They also plant sponsor violence. We saw that in the NSAS protest. They actually sponsor violence now. Right? There's a lot of impunity. They don't care what their public image is, etc. The other thing you need to note is that there's lack of capacity for government. There's just, it's only in Nigeria I know where you talk about, say, Ministry of Education. You measure the performance of Ministry of Education by how much they spend, not by the results. It's odd. They will tell you they spent 17 billion, not the results. There's just no capacity to even understand what government. There's absence of policy. Policy has no meaning in Nigeria. You have delivered papers on policies, and there's no such thing here. I have to pass a law on LGBT without a policy. First of all, what's the problem? You must have what are you trying to solve? How is it a problem? How is it your problem? Right? And what exactly, even if you think there's a problem, if you look at the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act, it's a blanket ban on possessions, on meetings, on support, etc. Contrary to international regulations, and the international regulations say this. That talks about that you need to make an exception or pass a law to deviate from the Constitution when it is to human rights. First of all, you need to justify it. Then your action must be proportionate. There is no such thing as blanket ban or the kind of fines we are saying. The whole SSMP is about 8 sections. Just 8. It was so drastic and so overreaching. Right? So there's nothing like policy in Nigeria. There's even inability to implement even whatever they have as policy. And but let's not forget, there's fear of diplomatic backlash. And they're also afraid of travel restrictions. So in spite of whatever they're doing in Nigeria, as long as their dominant begin to change. Now, some of the challenges confronting human rights infringement. The first one is ineffective human rights strategies and activities. Not coordinated. They don't think through some of the things that they want to do. They don't have strategies. Do you have a media strategy on particular projects, for example? Do you have legal strategies? In the legal strategy, do you have a litigation strategy? Because in those strategies, you think of all the things you're going to confront, all the challenges you're going to face. I know how you're going to read them. You're not going to succeed in everything, but at least you have thought through some things. Then we have the word I used before was gullibility of Nigerians. They will believe almost anything government says. Even when it's not even logical. I've had to, during the NSAS, I made enemies. I made such enemies only during the Occupy movement. I left groups. What they say, what they believe, just doesn't make sense. So it's a challenge, for example, if you're advocating issues on human rights to people, and they just don't understand, they just don't believe. But if you have a government narration, they choose to believe that. And the same thing goes with the judiciary. If a policeman says something in court, the judge believes him. It's not done anywhere. If you say, for example, that somebody committed an offense and you investigated, where is your investigation report? And there are formats of reports for everything, right? How you investigated, who you talked to, what kind of tests you did. How many of you here, for example, if you are faced with the DNA test, you know how to challenge the DNA test, the process of extraction of the DNA, the process of replication of the DNA, the test results, the accuracy of the process. Every test has an accuracy threshold. What is acceptable? So somebody says, oh, we found his fingerprint. Where? How? Where did you do test? If you found my fingerprint on the door handle, that's my fingerprint that is incriminating. Because many people use the same door handle. So there are many things that people tend to believe. But unfortunately, even the judiciary has that problem. So it's a challenge when you're trying to advocate an issue with the preferred belief government. There's also a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of reluctance to engage in human rights issues. Some people are afraid. It's okay, I can understand that. Not all of us will have the same courage of maybe some of the frontliners, right? And don't forget that we have those, for example, who know how to manage issues. We have those who know how to put in the fire. We have the foot soldiers. Everybody plays a role. So we don't expect the same from everybody. We also have generational gaps. There are some things you will say to people of my generation and this, they just won't understand it. Maybe out of culture. Then there's also, out of generational gap, is the knowledge gap. The older generation know much, much less than the younger generation. So it's a challenge trying to put in new issues or introduce new issues. We also have compromise activists. I was a member of CLO in 1989. I was in Human Rights Advocacy. I was involved in a number of human rights activities and affiliated some organizations. And I can tell you that there are very few that are credible human rights organizations. Very few human rights activists are actually credible. So not everybody is believable or has integrity. So that's a challenge because they will always compromise your work. Then there's also dissent among activists. We'll talk about networking later on. But that dissent is a challenge. During the NSAS, there were those who came in to support NSAS and then turned around to say we are no longer supporting NSAS and we should go home. So that kind of dissent is a challenge. Then we have differences among rival NGOs. Even when they are not rivals, there is just maybe lack of communication. But also, we have NGOs that want to be predominant. We have activists that want to be predominant. So they tend to push others down. So we have those kind of challenges. Then there's also competition for funding. Some activists and some NGOs will put you down just so that they can get the funding that you should get. Our funding is a very scarce resource. So those are some of the challenges. In terms of the general trends, I think maybe we know most of this, all of them. The use of lethal force. It's not in control of traditional media. Telling the media what to say and what not to say. For example, the new code, NBC code, says that no media organization should carry any event or any information or discuss any information that embarrasses government. Right? Excuse me. I can mention a number of international and local laws that has breached. NBC code is a bylaw, it's not a statutory, it's not a statute, it doesn't have the same force as the statute or the same status as the statute. But here is a bylaw that is contravening the statute. For example, Article 9 or 10 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights says that we all have the right to receive information. Now, NBC code is saying, no, you can only receive that information if it is embarrassing to you, to government, or to an individual in government. So we're beginning to see control of media, independent traditional media. We're trying to support social media. I think we are quite aware of that. but apart from sufficient of social media, they use social media to gather data about activities and events, but not for good purpose. We're still talking about trends. They are labeling people as hoodlums. I try to crack my head to understand how NSAF protesters could be called hoodlums. Right? I cracked my head. I knew that there were those being sponsored to be violent during the protest, so as to label the activists as violent, or the event as violent. But I also know that if you look at the palliative issue, breaking down those palliative stores, those were not protesters or even the hoodlums. Those were angry youths. So we don't know how to segregate or differentiate or profile what exactly was going on. But they tend to label people as hoodlums. We're beginning to see labeled as terrorists, right? And that comes with serious ramifications. We've seen detention without trial, we've seen sponsoring of violence. They now sponsor NGOs. So when we come to collaboration with NGOs, I've asked also you need to know who you're collaborating with and who you're dealing with. They travel, they monitor movements, they restrict movements, they monitor movements, they restrict movements, they monitor communications. How many of you here, either as individuals or NGOs, have taken steps to ensure that your communications are encrypted, your emails, etc., etc.? We've reached that point. Maybe we've not realized it, but we've reached that point. We're talking about rates now. There's nothing that says that tears cannot be rated today or tomorrow. People wearing masks, they cannot identify, etc. Those are threats. Those are present dangers. I tried to talk about threats specifically about individuals. I think I've covered a few of that, use of violence, threats, etc. Now we're finding that among slides, just for use of reference, slide 16, I think. 10. Okay, sorry. Sorry, I don't have good eyes anymore. Yeah. We're beginning to see that they are stopping people from flying. Right? They are seizing international passports. And only recently, a few days ago, I heard about somebody who was denied issuance of passport. Right? So we're beginning to see things like that. Of course, I talked about monitoring individual communications. Then for organization, briefly on the way forward, I talked about this in terms of risks, managing risk. Risk will always be there. We talk about this risk when we talk about the threats. The risks to your lives, the risks to your existence, etc. Everything is a risk. Right? Now you can't avoid risk completely, but you can manage them, you can mitigate them, but you must also identify them. So what steps would any NGO or any activist be taking to mitigate those risks? And I've tried to focus mainly on some legal and operational risks involved here. I also said that in looking at the way forward, we need to define what human rights are, right? And where they overlap. And people still don't understand some context of human rights. For example, what's the right to life? Maybe under the Constitution is restricted to the physical life, breathing and breathing. But it's way more than that. If government does anything that takes away your ability to earn a living, and you start to get, and takes away your right to life. So the right to life is a bit more than just breathing. So we need to understand again, in today's context, what human rights are. Every single right has ramifications, but not just the literal sense of it. And then who the human rights activists are. We know those who are not human rights activists who speak up. We know those who are not NGOs that speak up, for or against, and they can turn at any point. We also know that some of what we call the NGOs are government funded. Right? So are they the kind of people that you want to collaborate with? But the first big issue for me in the way forward is building internal capacity. I talked about the legal angle. Human rights is a very complex legal issue. It's nothing straightforward, as we may think. But we have evolving scenarios. We also have evolving jurisprudence, legal decisions, locally and internationally. So we all need to be up to date. Every member of staff in any organization needs to understand some of the legal issues, not just his or her work. You need to understand the right to life, the right to express themselves, and the right to expression, the right to associate, the right to property. If somebody seizes your phone, is that right? Can anybody in the US? You can't even stop your car to say you want to search. You must have probable cause. In Nigeria, for example, they put up on a highway. Highway is supposed to reduce the days on the highway. Now go and put a checkpoint. And then you begin to seize people's things or seize people's cars. Recently, 2 days ago, I heard that Lagos State government is auctioning cars that were seized. I'm sorry. Absolute rubbish. For traffic offense, you go and sell us somebody's car. It doesn't make any sense. It's not even proportionate to the offense alleged. And it's illegal, it's unconstitutional. So we need more in-house training on legal issues. And it's something that we need to keep updating, reviewing from time to time. There's never an end to understanding the law. As a lawyer, I'm not even sure I understand what law is. So I have to keep learning. Then part of in-house capacity, of course, the way forward is we'll start looking at operational issues that we deal with. Most human rights organizations will have their focal areas. Those things need to be strengthened operationally in the light of this kind of clampdown that we're seeing. Then, of course, we'll talk about the skills gap. The skills will include investigative skills now. I know we do a lot of surveys and reports, and also conduct researches or sponsor studies, but it's gathering information is now a different kind of skill. The key one is how you gather data electronically and things like that. But then you also need, at the moment, going forward, building capacity in-house to have somebody in charge of government and regulatory affairs. Not just legal advice now, regulatory affairs and government affairs. Who monitors what government is doing, what government is saying, what government policies are, how to deal with them. And probably somebody who would be tasked with liaising with government on your behalf if you choose to liaise. Who liaises with, say, Ministry of Education? Who liaises with Ministry of Health? So we need to have something like regulatory and government affairs in-house. Of course, the staff training and all that. But let me now ask you, in terms of staff, when you engage staff in-house as an organization, are you engaging the person's competence, or are you engaging the person's capacity? Sorry, are you engaging the person's capacity, or are you engaging the commitment of that person, or the person's character? Somebody might be competent, qualification okay, but in terms of character, it's a threat to the organization. So what exactly are you? Are you combining the two? How much of it can you do, etc.? So we've gone beyond engaging people just because they're competent. We're having to engage people who are not really competent but also have a commitment to some of the issues, or at least share the vision of the organization. And I'm not talking about that interview stage. You want to do some background checks and things like that. Part of the way forward is also building the organizational profile. For organizations, for example, how many organizations are known, are beyond the spheres of activities? I mean, almost everybody knows cell. right? So I'm asked, for your own organizations, how many people know you and what you do? So part of the way forward is that building your profile as a credible organization, known to the public, known to other human rights organizations. There are some international organizations that are represented here by local organizations. But you also need to be known to them. So there's a need to know to build a profile. So in terms of activities, who you invite to come and speak, how you attend their own activities, how you collaborate with them, all of those go into building the organizational profile of each organization going forward. It strengthens you in the view of the clampdown. It has that effect. Now, on NGO networking, I've said you need to define who an NGO is, you need to define what they do, you need to profile them before you talk about networking with them. Otherwise, you are a threat to you. And I referred to Nigerian Bar Association, for example. The first vice chairman of Nigerian Bar Association at national level is in charge of human rights. The vice chairman of every branch of MBA in Nigeria is in charge of human rights. So we need to be able to collaborate with them in terms of networking. I'm part of a group called the Section of Public Interest and Development Law Speed Up. In fact, I'm the alternate chairman for the planning committee in Ibadan. Right? And we do a lot of public interest law. Right? So having organizations who want to collaborate with us or are known to us that we can collaborate with so that we can build their profile. We know them. If anything happens, we can step in. Right? So NGO networking is important. If you're dealing with gender issues or sexuality issues, we need to collaborate with FIDA, Federation of International Women Lawyers. In fact, sometimes your first remedy is not to rush to another NGO, it's to rush to FIDA and see if they can assist. Not maybe your core issue, but if you have issues running with government, they can also come to your aid. And we have very powerful women in FIDA as well. And we have other civil society organizations. But I'm saying, depending on what you do, you should not be confused with things like faith-based organizations. If you're dealing with sexuality rights or gender rights, and you're dealing with faith-based organizations, you're going to have a problem. And they won't even understand what you're talking about. They will outrightly post them. So in NGO networking, we need to do this, but there's a need for NGO networking. And I said, the reason for NGO networking is, first of all, it gives you good protection as human rights community. We are part of human rights community. So NGO networking, being recognized, being known, being seen as authentic is important. And I said that the areas of common interest, and then we can also fill in gaps. I'm not sure that any NGO can say that they fully cover everything, because there are challenges, funding, etc., etc. So sometimes they need to synergize, either to save money or to build, to increase capacity. Now, I also talked about in terms of way forward, building partnerships. This time with media organizations. Right? The first way or the best way to either do your project or to put out whatever is happening to you in terms of adversity or a clampdown is journalists and the media houses. Right? So there's a need to collaborate with journalists and media houses. In fact, as I said, they are also affected by this clampdown. Let's not forget. Right? They are generally more powerful than NGOs. Right? And they have access to people and information and can ask questions that NGOs cannot ask. So there is a need to collaborate and build capacity with media organizations. You may need to choose, because not all media organizations are also credible organizations. But you need to choose. In some media organizations, there are specialists dealing with human rights issues, gender issues, etc. So if you take this day, for example, take channels, there are lawyers there who can collaborate with and invite your events and whatever you need to do to collaborate with them. Also going forward, I said we also need to
to collaborate with the National Human Rights Commission. They are not only faster than courts, they are government, they are statutory organization, and is affiliated to the Office of the Attorney General. So if you have an issue, for example, you can run to the National Human Rights Commission. So there is then the need to collaborate with the National Human Rights Commission on some issues. At least you need to be known to the Human Rights Commission. I've also said that the Human Rights Commission, for example, can tackle government where you cannot tackle government. I've seen them tackle the Nigerian army. I've seen them tackle the Nigerian police. You can go to court, may not be effective, but you can go to Human Rights Commission and have some remedies. They do issue remedies. They do intervene on some issues and issue sanctions, and even ask for remediation by way of damages. They also intervene in marital matters, because say custody of children. And I've done a few of that. I mean, when a man wants to punish his wife, he takes the children away from her. People as young as 5, 6, even 2 years old, even female children. He's destroying the children's lives, but he's trying to punish women. The Human Rights Commission can come into things like that. So as an NGO dealing with, say, gender issues, you have a very quick result. And I said they can conduct their own investigations, they can impose remedies, and they have presence everywhere. They are in Lagos here. Most states of the Federation, they have offices, even though they are really understaffed. Part of the way forward is building coalitions with international organizations. There are several international organizations where they offer observer status as member, or observer member, or whatever it is. It's an observer status. Others offer membership status. They are very powerful, and it includes United Nations organizations. How many NGOs are dealing with UNESCO, for example? UNESCO deals with some of the issues that most of the NGOs are dealing with. And they also have their own projects. And they can also fund some of those projects. So in going forward, we need to build this partnership and coalition with international organizations. There are many that maybe we can talk about, but even at the African level, we have observer status at the African Commission at their meetings. And that's the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And they need to know you and what you're doing, and you also need to know what they're doing. And there are very good options to run to and inform when we have issues or clampdowns and things like that. I mentioned a few also. I mentioned the African Commission. In fact, in 2017, there was a guideline by the African Commission on NGOs. And it's more of a protection for NGOs and how to limit government intervention in the affairs of NGOs. It was a 2017 guideline. I will send a PDF of that later on. The European Commission is interested in what NGOs are doing here. So you can collaborate with the European Commission. There's the American Bar Association, which has been interested in Nigeria's affairs and human rights for quite a long time now. So we can do these collaborations with international organizations. The other collaboration or coalition or partnership we need to build will build a diplomatic community. A number of diplomatic missions in Nigeria have human rights segments. The American Embassy is one, the UK High Commission is one, the Swiss Embassy, Canadian Embassy, are all involved in human rights. So there is now a need to do some collaboration with this diplomatic community. Get them involved, get involved in their affairs, get them involved in your affairs. Invite them to speak, for example. Ask them issues. They also provide liaison between you and similar organizations in their countries. They all even advise on funding matters. They also fund some activities, and things like that. But part of the reason why we also need to collaborate with the diplomatic community is travel matters. There are times, and I remember in 1993, some of my colleagues left me and I disappeared to the US. How did that happen? Because we've been collaborating with the US Embassy. I was in Kaduna then. There was a consular office in Kaduna, the American consular office in Kaduna. So it was easy for them when there was a threat to, if they needed to leave, at least temporarily, that they could leave. So it provides that kind of. It also helps when you need to travel. Say your visa, you need to travel for a function. I mean, if they knew as a human rights organization, it becomes a bit easier. But some organizations are just not credible. So there's a need to build credibility. They also have diplomatic support. Like, for example, during the clampdown, there are some of the consular protections that they offer. I mean, they can offer asylum, for example. You cannot enter their embassy, right? Those are some of the options we need to keep looking at seriously. Part of going forward is also the legal remedies available. I mean, we always wait for things to happen, wait for the clampdown to happen before we have to react. But unfortunately, it gets too late at that point. So we need to take preemptive or proactive measures to prevent the kind of events that led to loss of lives. We don't want any activists to die before we have to look for damages, we have a receipt for redress, appear before a panel of inquiry. It don't matter. Panel of inquiry is not. So let me ask you, do you know the title of the panel of inquiry in Lagos? Does anybody know? It's meant to see the victims and how to redress them by way of damages, give them money. That's nothing. It's not going to indict anybody. It's just going to say, okay, you were aggrieved, we will give you 2 million, we award you 2. That's what they are doing. And they've set aside some money, I think about 200 million or so, to redress that. If that's the kind of redress we're looking for before panels of inquiry, we have a long way to go. So we need to be proactive, we need to be preventive. For example, if they are monitoring your communication, or they seize your phone, or they arrest an activist, or they stop an event, how about writing to the American Embassy? How about writing to the press? How about writing to the Office of the Attorney General? How about writing? So some proactive measures can be taken, or preventive actions can be taken to prevent clampdown. Of course, it also means, part of preventive measures, that it's not every event and what you do or what your plans are that you put out to the public. You don't put all your strategies out to the public, so you need to be careful. We also need to inform Human Rights Commission. They can send people to come and stay with you. During the Occupy movement, MBA appointed me to head the team of lawyers who were to give legal protection to those who were protesting. And I remember we were sleeping. Zina was there. We were sleeping outside the secretariat in Abuja. And the then chief security officer to the president, Jonathan, used to come with people to come and arrest people. We have to take preventive measures, right? So collaborate with lawyers, external, internal, etc. You can file preemptive actions in court, right? As part of litigation within the local judiciary. You can get part of preemptive measures. You can go to Human Rights Commission, and then the Public Complaints Commission, which we don't seem to remember much about or know much about. We actually have a Public Complaints Commission in Nigeria. And in fact, their office is just next door to the National Human Rights Commission in Abuja. I don't know where their offices are in Nigeria. Part of the international measures include the ICC. During the Occupy movement, ICC contacted me when they were doing their investigations. I had to link them up with people who give them information. So we need to be able to, we can report in terms of remedies and legal actions that we can take. So let's not look at our own internal capacities as activists or NGOs alone. Let's look at what we can do with the international community. ICC is one of them. The African Court on Human and People's Rights is one of them. Right? There is I think Article 34 or so says that an individual cannot file an action in the African court, right? Unless the country, his country issues a declaration to that effect. And Nigeria has refused to give a declaration. But there are many ways of going around it, which we can talk about some other issues. You can also actually file actions when, during the Ogoni crisis, when it was really a burning issue. We found that Shell was buying arms for soldiers and police to repress the Ogoni people. Actions were filed not in Nigeria, outside Nigeria, in the US. So those options also available. And then of course, we can file actions at the ECOWAS court. In Nigerian court, the ECOWAS court does not have the power to bite, to enforce its own judgment. And that's the biggest problem it has, right? But they can issue sanctions, they can make declarations, which can be helpful. So we have those legal options and legal strategies. Part of legal and operational risk, of course, will include electronic monitoring. Has it ever crossed your mind that maybe somebody who walks into your office is working for the police or DSS or something, pretending to be a victim, wanting something, and then he plants a microphone, right? So there are those operational risks for you, and some of the measures that can be taken. Again, part of my field is I specialize in telecoms and also security, internet security. It's a very complex thing. I'm not sure if I even understand how the thing is going now. But we need now, going forward, not assume that what we're discussing, let me present that way. Let's not assume that we're not being monitored. Just put it that way. But there are things and measures that we can take to avoid things. How did they get some of the information they got on the NSAS protesters? How do you think they got that? It's that kind of monitoring, electronic monitoring, planting people in, either as staff or as activists, etc. Going forward, we need to think about those things. Of course, we talk about seizure of documents, destruction of evidence, etc. And what do you do when your phone is taken? Did you do backup? Did you send the video to somebody else to keep in case something happens, etc.? So there are those things that we can take, and then some mitigating measures. Also, part of the in-house issues that we can consider, things like contingency plans, communication policies, and manuals within the office, and media strategies. I'm hoping that a few of those thoughts will probably lead to some discussions that we can have later on. Thank you very much. I hope it wasn't too boring.
I think it's a bit difficult to consider the many ways that your rights are simply non-existent as a citizen of this country. And even though I know that there are aspects of the conversation that were tailored to human rights organizations, I think there are things for us all to think about. Like us being aware, for instance, of the fact that your communications could be monitored, being more conscious of your environment and your interactions, and also making sure that you're aware of what, I was about to say rights, but that probably is not the right word. But what options you have if you're in a situation where your rights have been violated. So thank you very much, Blaise and Israel, for your very detailed breakdown of not just the true state of affairs, but also what our options are. I'm going to move very swiftly along to our first panel conversation. Can I have our chairs set up, please? And it's a conversation on the gender bias that exists within human rights, dealing with human rights. recognizing the gender bias in Nigeria's legal system. And we might want to ask, why must we acknowledge gender bias? What does this mean in everyday terms? I'm hoping that we'll be able to answer some of these questions. And we have a really great lineup. So I'm going to introduce very quickly, starting with Tiananmen Square. Tiananmen is a legal practitioner with 5 years experience as a corporate commercial litigator. She's a writer whose works focus on women and members of the LGBTQ+ community. Right after her, I'd like to welcome Chioma Ogwegu. She's a research and programs professional with over 15 years of experience in the development sector, and she's passionate about the intersections of women's rights and youth development issues, as well as how technology can be used as a tool for growth. It's my pleasure. Right after her, it's my pleasure to welcome Ireti Bakari Yusuf. She's a management professional, a TV and radio broadcaster, and an SGBV and Human Rights Advocate. Can we give her a round of applause? Last but definitely not least, like we like to say, I'd like to welcome Olotu Oweche. She's a writer, lawyer, and feminist activist. She also acts as the Programs Officer for Gender and Diversity for the Initiative for Equal Rights, TIERS. So we're going to take our time and just have our guests come up. But I'm looking forward to a wonderful... It's my phone. Okay. I want to make sure I'm not out of time. I'm looking forward to a wonderful, very insightful conversation about why these conversations are essential and what it is that we should be thinking about when we think about making things better. Okay. So can you give over to one mic? No. Yes, so between and then. Does anybody want to wipe? Everybody's okay? All right then. For the purposes of this conversation, I will be referring to Ms. Ireti as either Ms. Ireti or Sisi. So if you hear me say Sisi, I'm speaking to her, don't be confused. And I would like to start the conversation with you, Sisi. When we talk about human rights, there's often this drive about, why are you trying to pinpoint it? Why are you trying to pick certain, aspects of the population out? This is a general situation. Why is it important for us to recognize the gender bias that exists in the legal system?
Thanks, Eric. And hold on. Hello. It's green. Hello. Hello. Yes. Are we afternoon or morning still? Morning, everybody. How are you? We're all doing good. Thanks, Arit, and thank you to our speaker, Marista. Thank you so much. I was very interested, and you gave some very practical. It's actually the practical parts that I enjoy the most. So thank you. You asked a very good question, and I did get that this morning when I was sharing the flyer again. And I think the reason for that is often when, as a people, as human beings, as citizens, we find ourselves just kind of churning on with life as it is, we forget that there are vulnerable people in our society. We forget that we do have, much as what Azina said is our problem is intersectional, there are still sections, and those sections, unless you connect with them on a daily basis, unless you have a disabled person living in your home, unless you have a daughter that's graduated from law school and isn't able to get a job, unless you have an aunt who is a doctor and for some reason she can't become a surgeon. Unless those things are real lived experience, you tend to forget that practically everything every single thing is genderized, you know. Even in SARS, let's be frank, was genderized. COVID, Ebola, everything is just the way it is, because the world is that complex, and Nigeria makes it even more so. So I think that's where that question comes from, but that's also why it is so critically important that we must, when looking at a problem like the way Barrister said it earlier, go into the detail, because details matter. Details are where actually your rights live within. So we can have an umbrella that covers all of us, but you know, you might be at the edge of that umbrella where one half of your shoulder is getting wet and everybody else is covered. So, and nobody would think about it, nobody remember, because we're all trying to kind of fit into the same space. So those details are critically important, and that's why we must always remember when we're thinking about our legal system in Nigeria in particular, and also in the other parts of the world, but let's stick to Nigeria, we must always remember how, as members of the vulnerable groups in our society, how our laws impact our existence and our daily, you know, navigations, if you like. I hope that
that's actually a perfect place to land it, because my next question, and it's coming to you, Tina Praise, how do those laws influence or impact our lives in the everyday space? I think many times when we talk about laws, they can tend to feel very abstract or very academic. But when we talk about the gender bias that exists in our legal system, what are some of the things that you would like us to think about?
Yeah, so, I mean, as women, we know that most of the laws that exist in the country, they probably were not made with women in mind. And you can see, even from the Constitution, which is supposed to be the ground norm, even from the Constitution, which is supposed to be the ground norm, like the basis of all of the laws that exist in the country, that too, if you read through it, it seems like it is tailored just for men, because there are not even a lot of gender-neutral pronouns in that Constitution. It's all about he, this, he, that, he, that. The pronoun he is mentioned more times than I can imagine in that Constitution. So it makes you question, who are these laws made for? Who do they have in mind when they sat down and wrote these things down? And then if you go through most of the laws that we have now, there are certain laws that exist and you wonder why. For example, the labor laws we have now, it specifically states that women, aside nurses, I think, cannot work the night shift. Why is most times they like to give the excuse that they might face harassment, it might be dangerous for them, but who are the people making the work environment dangerous for women? Address that instead of like limiting them from working. And then if you go through the Constitution again, you see that in Nigeria, a man can easily get married to a foreigner and pass some citizenship to his foreign spouse, but women can't do that. If you go into the criminal code, for example, the offense of indecent assault. You see that indecent assault against men is treated more seriously than indecent assault against women. The criminal code specifically describes indecent assault against men as a felony, which is a more grievous offense, and then describes indecent assault against women as a misdemeanor, which is a lesser offense with a lesser punishment. So you're already stating that, okay, one group matters more than the rest, and we treat them more seriously than the others. Let's now talk about the strenuous task it takes to prove rape and defilement and sexual offenses against women. Now I know there's a section in the criminal code, I think 211, the one that talks about defilement against girls under the age of 16. It tells you that for you to convict a person accused of defilement, there has to be one witness, testimony of one witness. And I don't think people go to rape or defile women with someone for you to have a witness to do that. So why are these laws existing? And also there's the fact that most of the laws, like aside all of this, there is also no law that makes it illegal or a crime to discriminate against women based on their gender. So we find out that it is very possible for women to work the same, or be employed and work, put in the same hours as men and not get paid equally as men. And all of this just, it's a lot, and it shows that the legal system is really not, it's not enough. But these are issues I can remember off the top of my head, but there are more. There are more laws like this that discriminate against women. So this is what it really is like for women out there.
You said something I found very profound. You said we're not looking at the reasons why these situations exist and how to fix them. We have just created laws that essentially, create a barrier for so many of us to exist. Achoma, your work also centers around a lot of research and around a lot of the experiences, of course, that women we have in everyday life. So I would like some of your thoughts and your perspectives again on what are some of the real life ways that these discriminatory laws manifest in our everyday lives that we, again, go through probably thinking of as, oh, it's just the way it is.
Thank you, Timini. You were talking about some of the ways in which the law, discriminates against women. And one of the laws that I remember is the Penal Code allows a man to, lightly chastise his wife. That's not so long as there's no grievous bodily harm or grievous harm. And that's like the law allows you to be violent against your wife. Do you understand? So it means that there are rising cases of domestic violence in Nigeria and in places where they're under the Penal Code. You can get away with it. The law allows you to be violent. It's also why there are rising cases of spousal rape, for instance. The law does not recognize that a person can rape their wife. It's also things like maybe customary laws of inheritance. You can't inherit property. Women can't inherit property. So even if and these laws sometimes they don't discriminate whether you are a heterosexual or straight or queer woman, because as a queer woman, if you are raped, for instance, and you get pregnant, you can't get an abortion. The law does not allow you to get an abortion. So some of these laws, or you're a young woman or you're a queer woman who you can't inherit your father's property because you're female. So the law does not it doesn't, as much as our laws don't even recognize queer people in the first place, but even the laws that are generally affect women, it also still affects queer women even more. So generally, there are so many, like she's mentioned, there are so many ways in which this legal system affects us individually. So like I've said, sexuality and reproductive right health, for instance. There are restrictions that affect us. So when it comes to accessing safe abortion, accessing sexual rights services, sexual health services. There are restrictions when it comes to, like I mentioned, domestic violence, other kinds of violence, proven rape. The laws around sexual violence and rape are so restrictive, the law of evidence, for instance, around it is restrictive, and it takes, so it kind of just, what's the word? You just lose the will, if you like, to even pursue the matter. So those are some of the ways in which, I hate this mask. Those are some of the ways in which terms, the legal system actually discriminates it or makes it difficult for you as a woman in Nigeria.
You again make a very wonderful point about how it feels like we haven't even finished talking about how the law discriminates against women. Then we have to explore, take one step further, and see how the law just tries its best to make life a bit more difficult, just a little bit more difficult for LGBTQ plus people. Well, can you tell us, expand, just give us your thoughts on some of the other ways that our legal system makes it difficult for LGBTQ plus people to access services, to exist.
Thank you. The fact that there is a law that criminalizes same-sex marriage in Nigeria, that fact alone exposes queer women to a multitude of abuses and against their existence. So it violates their right to live, violates their right to associate with women they want to associate with, and it exposes them to more risk, more harm from other people, even based on whether or not they are queer. That's one less. One you face from being queer or being thought to be queer. So that's the exposure that the Nigerian laws not only prevent you from exercising your rights, they now put you in harm's way, so to speak. It then means that queer women are, Nigerian generally suffer harm, queer women suffer harm on the double, so to speak. You can't get married to your partner, if you face corrective rape, and then a lot of recommend that there's something that is corrective rape or there's forced marriage based on sexuality. So we can have laws trying to criminalize or prevent child marriage. What about forced marriage? To change your orientation. Not people talk about that. So there are many parts of experience of the criminal that are ignored by the law, and that's just irresponsible. Very irresponsible.
Extremely so. Quick question. How many of us are familiar here with the SSMPA? Okay, we know about it. How many of us have gone through it? How many of us know the ways that it affects LGBTQ plus people in everyday life? Or what is in it or what's not in it? Okay. I mean, it's not so bad. I think that our legal system is designed for us not to engage with it. You know, yes, exactly. And if you don't know your rights, then I mean, as for the few rights that you are allowed, if you don't know that you have them, how can you insist on them? Timnafa, can you break down for us just a few, I mean, nothing too technical, but some of the aspects of that law and what they mean in real life?
Okay, so the same-sex, before, most times when I'm asked about the Same-Sex Prohibition Act, I'd like to start by saying that there really was no need for that act. It was uncalled for because it's not like queer people were lining up hats. The registry saying, let's do this. And before that act was enacted, there were actually other laws like the criminal code, the penal code, Sharia laws, so many others criminalizing sexual acts between same sex. So why did you feel the need to do this? So if you go through the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act, it first of all starts by prohibiting marriages and civil unions between same-sex couples. Like, it makes it so broad, like all of the provisions there are so vague and so broad that it can basically just be applied to anything. Like, you really can just be living with a friend and they tell you, yes, this is a civil union, or this is you cohabiting with someone of the same sex and for 10 years. And then it goes further to criminalize forming gay organizations or clubs that support gay rights. And this then makes it difficult for organizations that want to cater to the needs of queer folks to exist because you have criminalized the forming and the forming of those associations. Then it goes further to say no public displays of affection between same-sex couples. That's 10 years. So I can just be holding your hands or in fact, there's no way to know because nobody writes I'm queer or I'm a lesbian on the forehead. So you can really, so you really can just see two platonic friends on the streets and something as casual as a hug or something as casual as a click on the cheek now becomes a big issue, and that's 10 years in prison under the law. Then I think, what else is there? Yes, it goes further to say people who support person and everything, I think it prescribes 10 years for them as well. And it makes it so difficult to exist because the law, like I said, the law wasn't necessary. So it doesn't seem to me like they even want to enforce these laws. But what the law now does is it empowers the homophobes in Nigeria. Everybody's police now. Just get up up now and say, oh, we have the backing of the SSMPA, so it emboldens homophobes and gives them the right to actually instigate violence against queer persons. So violence can be physical, it can be sexual. And because these laws exist, it then makes it harder for queer people to report these laws, because they are even being extorted by state actors, the policemen and all of that, based on their perceived sexual orientations. And the fact that these laws can apply to anybody, because like I said, nobody can tell if you are queer by looking at you. But then they make use of stereotypes and figure out, okay, maybe this person is queer. So a very nice looking guy who looks clean, like he takes his bath, can be I'm so sorry. A fresh looking guy like that, now, oh no, you must be homosexual. Why are you taking care of yourself this much? They carry you on the road. A woman that looks like me now, because I get stopped a lot by a policeman. Oh, why are you dressed like a boy? I mean, my friend was just stopped at the bathroom there because she was going into the female bathroom and they were like, that's for the female, come. I mean, but she saw where she was going into. So people face a lot of these harassment based on how they present, and it might not even be anything sexual. And that's another thing. These laws are made without considering the fact that there's a difference between sexual orientation and gender identity. So I might be expressing my gender identity, but that doesn't mean I am a homosexual or whatever. So everything is just lumped together, and we are all facing the consequences of it.
I'm thinking about, I mean, a whole number of us were all sitting out here, and we were hugging, so many of my friends and my people are here. I'm thinking about the reality of the fact that according to the Nigerian legal system, that could be considered a crime. But then it speaks again to how punitive our legal system is. And how many of you remember when that bill was passed? There was a wave of violence over the next few weeks, you know, and you're right, it empowers homophobes. It makes people believe that I have the right to discriminate against you for whatever reason. And Choma, I know we spoke, we did an episode of Untold Facts, and we talked about, no, it's not, I'm not asking you for facts or figures, but we made some points about how this law has affected people's freedom to carry out acts of violence, family dynamics, and so on. Are you able to speak a little bit about that?
Okay, I'll try.
Just try small.
Okay, no, I think when we were talking about, we talked about the perception, how the perceptions have changed with regard to queer people in Nigeria over the years. And so we're talking about how, I think I'll go back a little. This year I did a survey on how COVID-19 has affected queer people in Africa and in Nigeria. One of the things that we found out was that, you know, because more queer people because of the lockdowns, queer people had to stay at home. And so they were now, some of them were having to stay with family members who were homophobic because they had nowhere else. You know, maybe normally they could go and stay with their friends, but during the lockdown, people just had to. So there were increased cases of domestic violence from family members who just wanted to, like, you know, you're expressing yourself, not in my house, please. So there were so many reports from just speaking to respondents, so many reports of them saying, look, it's now worse for me because I'm at home. And that's one of the things that's the impact of the coronavirus. And then even women in general experienced a higher level of domestic violence during, since this pandemic began. Because again, there was a lockdown, and of course the law allows them, you know. So essentially, I think with the way that our laws are set up, and you know, when there are situations like this where what sometimes I would call unique this year has been a unique year, you know, and so there has been the pandemic, and so it just feels like people now feel like, okay, this is the time, this is the chance, we now have the time to, if you're my child and you're queer, you're in my house, don't be for you. They now feel like they have And it's, yeah, and even just in general, even you're going back to that research, in general, people feel that they are enforcers. So, I mean, there are all these other laws that they don't enforce. They don't enforce law of something as simple as people would hail people who are Yahoo people, they will hail them, they will get money from them. But once they see two gay people together, or people who they assume or presume to be gay, they're like, okay, it's against the law. Don't you know it's against the law? So the law has emboldened people in that way, in the sense that people feel that the homophobia that was in them, both at the family level, so they're enforcing that at the family, at the domestic level, and also just in general.
Of course, then immediately also thinking about the Gender and Equal Opportunities bill that we have been waiting for a long time, and probably will all be old and grey when that bill finally comes to the light. Ms. Reti, you're familiar with that bill? Yes. Can you talk about some of the things that bill was trying to accomplish or hoping to accomplish for women?
Well, it's to get rid of the nonsense that already exists. And let's be frank, practically everything. I think it's been there since 2010, and they're still not accepting it. And I think the excuse, and it's the excuse of not accepting it that actually always marvels me, that it's going against our traditional or customary laws, and I don't know what that means, literally. So here's the other thing. This draws on to your first question to me. It's easy, very, very easy for us to presume that in Nigeria, there are no barriers for women. You will be surprised at how many women in the corporate space, right, actually believe, well, I've always been okay, my friends are okay, I'm riding okay, I've been able to understand, on the pulpit and they preach at young people without telling them what they've had to sacrifice or negotiate along the way. So when you talk about things like equal pay and equal rights at work, etc., they're thinking, what are you talking about? You get your maternity leave, don't you? Your colleague that's a man, you people are, and it was when I moved to this country, it took me opening my eyes, if you like, really opening my eyes to what was around me. And here's my experience of that. So I've been headhunted from England. I had no intention of moving to Nigeria, right? Pick up the phone, some bloke calls me from Nigeria with an American accent. I drop the phone and he's like, what you talking about? Drop the phone, he calls me back, and he's headhunting me to come and work for Celtel, right? Okay, 2 weeks later, by the way, I had a panel interview on the phone. One female, do you know what she was interested in? Yeah, and she was talking to the wrong girl, and then the other thing she was interested in is my accent. How are people going to be able to understand me? I said, are they deaf? Leave matter. So that was the thing, and then I get it. So they've gone through all these things and made all these fuss, over me and flown me to this country, and I'm working. I've come from, the last person that I was supposed to meet with for a meet and greet, by the way, they had offered me the job and everything, was the CEO. And this female, I say something all the time. If you have never been told there is a barrier, you don't see a barrier. I was never brought up that you're a woman, there's a barrier, never saw it. I still don't see it. I can't imagine where it is. Somebody needs to draw it for me. I don't know what shape it is. So for me, having a voice, being a female, being independent, asking, demanding, knowing what I want, it's something that I have to say, yes, it's a blessing, because I've since realized it is a blessing. What I thought was a norm is actually not the norm. Anyway, going back to, so he's asking me, why do you want to move back to Nigeria? Well, I didn't realize that I was being an insolent woman, clearly. Because I just said like, well, why ever not? By the way, you came after me. I didn't ask for a job. Anyway, to cut a long story short, do you know, this man actually said they shouldn't employ me. This is after you've done all this paraphernalia around me and brought me over. And he said they shouldn't employ me. And I said, why? He said, because he doesn't think you'll fit into Nigeria. It took me a long time to figure out what that meant. But it didn't deter me because, and when the person that was communicating between us said, but give me the weekend, I'm going to work on him, I don't know what the problem is, and then they came back to me and they said, he said, we can employ you, but we must reduce the offer we made to you. Well, you weren't even able to pay me what I was earning in the UK anyway. So does he want to play that game? Half feet, as we say in Nigeria. It doesn't matter, bring it on. And that's why I ended up here. Like I said, it took me a long time to figure out what was it that this man didn't like about me. Well, guess what? Not only was I, outspoken female, I also smoke cigarettes openly, and I don't apologize for it. I enjoy smoking cigarettes, actually. Something must kill somebody. But I didn't know, again, that was because I had sat in front of this, king of patriarchy, totally not realizing, and even if I had, it wouldn't matter, just being myself. I had started in an organization where I was being myself, and I was as outspoken as this, and I would fight for the vulnerable, the younger people, yada, 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 and for equality. I did not realize that I was busy upsetting people and the senior boss, and most of them were men. Even the women had an issue with me. Like, who does she think she's? Because she's from England. All this one. It really was bizarre. So going back to what you were saying, that equal pay and equal opportunities. My promotion, I found out later that every time, this is the God's honest truth, every time my name was put in front of them on a round table for promotion, and they would have done a survey in the organization, and my name, they would do a survey with all the young people, and they would say, who are the senior leaders in the organization, and my name would always come top. People, they would sit around and they would discuss, and they would get to him and he'd be like, pass, she's not ready. Seriously. That is gender discrimination. This is the first time I'm telling this story in public, and the reason I tell it is so that we have to, and we are forced to open our eyes and really, really, really look at the detail. That's why I enjoyed Barrister's speech earlier on when he said, human rights, it's not just about your right to live. If you are truncating the avenue by which I earn a living, the avenue by which I grow professionally, the avenue by which I can actualize as a person, as a woman, as a member of the human race, as a mentor, as a mother, as a sister, as a friend, as a lover. If you are truncating that avenue, then you are cheating me out of my human rights. And we must always, always, always remember that. It's so much broader than this little bit here, and if they truncate mine, they're going to truncate yours too.
So I'm just going to have a couple more questions before we open to you all for your questions. And we will end with you, because I want to hear your thoughts about what a society that honors the rights of women and LGBTQ plus people looks like. But Choma, I want to, before that, ask you, what are some of the things we are missing? Because that bill has not been passed. Because it has gone, it has come back, they edited it, they watered it down, they sent it back, they brought it back, and right now everybody's just kind of all standing around in a circle wondering what to do next. But what are some of the things that we are missing because that bill has not become a law?
I'll try.
Just a few.
Just a few. Well, like I mentioned earlier about safe access to safe abortion, and like I said, safe abortion is not just a heterosexual woman issue; it's an issue for also queer women. So that's something that the bill tried to address, and just around sexual. This thing. Then there are things like equal opportunities. It was also talking about equal opportunities. So, as a woman in the police, for instance, you need consent. You need consent from the IG of police if you want to get married or something like that. You need you can't get pregnant as a single woman. So it means that even if as a queer woman you decide that you want to have a kid, you can be is it suspended from the police? Yes, you can be discharged from the police just because you got pregnant. So those are some of the things that the bill wanted to address on a general scale. Of course, the Police Act still has to be amended, but he wanted to address those kind of restrictions that apply to women generally. And then things like, of course, we now have the VAP Act, that's Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, that addresses things like female genital mutilation and cutting. But the bill essentially tried to look for ways to protect women from sexual violence, provide more opportunities for women to be advanced through the labor force, through just all the other ways that we have mentioned that the law discriminates against women. So those were the things that the bill was trying to address. But of course, that bill has gone. Did he also go to the last year as well? This year again. So like every other year, the bill comes out, but then they turn it down. But the thing I wanted to point out is that because I was talking about this earlier in the day, and we said, I think it was me and you were talking about how the bill always gets knocked down by people in the legislature and how it's just the patriarchy. But the truth of the matter is that there are also people who are working against this bill becoming a law. They are working actively against it. There are right-wing organizations that are doing so there are right-wing organizations that made it possible for this SSMPA to be passed in Nigeria. Many organizations that do this kind of work, I'm just doing research on it, so that's how come I know. Many organizations that do this kind of work don't realize that there is a huge push now by right-wing organizations in Africa, and they are pumping in money to kind of, spread hate. So hate against LGBT plus groups. There's a major one that is their job is just funding hate against LGBT plus groups. There's another one that their focus is safe abortion and women's rights. And so we see that these legislators don't pass the bill, but there are actually people who have gone to lobby them and say, look, don't pass the bill. So I think my takeaway is that we need to be aware that we should be doing more, and as much as those organizations are pushing and doing all of this work to lobby politicians, we also should start going into that space and also equipping ourselves with information to see how we can tackle some of these gaps.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about how many times we feel such a sense of helplessness about the way things are. And we're going through life dealing with all these different, situations. A policeman is beating a woman on the road. The first question is not how dare he. The question is maybe she was rude to him. There are ways that we have been conditioned to accept that this is the existence, and we find ourselves trying to work our way around them, rather than recognizing the extent to which these things should really, really, really not even be part of the conversation. And I'll take I'll ask our last question before we open it up. But for you, what does a fair society look like? When we talk about creating laws that protect women, that protect LGBTQ plus people, a legal system that recognizes and protects, what does that mean to you?
It would mean that if, first of all, there are laws to protect against abuses that work, laws that work, laws that are implemented, that means that when I go to the gender death office in the police station, they will respond to me. They wouldn't say it's a private matter, go home to your husband. They wouldn't put us on TV, tell us to hug. It would mean that my concerns as a woman would be held by the police officer, and they would file a case immediately. We must get a case. That's one. It would also mean that in the Senate or National Assembly or wherever, there will be women like me there, whether they are queer or they are straight, addressing my concerns and passing laws that would affect me and people that look like me. It would mean that women that have disabilities are on panels, are in the Senate, are working on issues that matter to all of us. It would mean that if I walk on the street and somebody tries to harass me, people will stand up to defend me and not support him. So there are many, it's like widowhood practices will no longer be existing. In fact, one of the reasons why that bill is facing challenges is because it gives widows the right to become custodians of their husband's property upon his death. So they say it's against traditional laws, and of course you're going to clamp that down because they are mostly men who inherit their brother's properties. So it means that you recognize a woman's worth as a partner to her husband or her partner, whatever sibling it is, as an equal partner who contributes and is not entitled to property. It will mean that women don't face disrespect. Women don't have to put their chest twice over. If they are at work and you're committed, was it attractive? It wasn't. It was my intellect. It would mean that if I put something on the table as a woman, you would listen to me because I am saying something that makes sense, not because I won't question my ability because I'm a woman. So there are many aspects to these things for me, and I think that we need to keep pushing. We need to keep pushing to be heard, because I know it's a tough ask because you just want to be happy. We are unhappy as Nigerian women. I don't think any Nigerian woman is fully happy, because you could die. There's been Tina. Nothing will happen, and until we keep pushing for more.
So, can I just say something about this special favor? Yes, just 1 minute. Yes, 1 minute. Then we can take a couple of questions.
Yeah, so very quickly, every time somebody says to you as a woman or, as a person, just as a woman, you got that because you got special favor. Please stop defending it and say, no, I didn't. So, men get special favors all the time, right? All the time. They don't have to apologize for it, okay? I know of a man who was beating his wife, who had to be given a job by another man in order to protect the wife from being beaten, right? So let's stop apologizing for special. If my guy here wants to give me a special favor, or my boyfriend there wants to give me a special favor, please do, I will not deny you. Just let you know.
We can take a couple of questions. 2 questions, very quick. We have just about 7 minutes. So, does anybody? Yes, Barrister? You can take your mask on. It's okay.
It's not really a question. It's just maybe trying to recognize some of the challenges that the panel has raised, which is this: that within the human rights community, where we are actively fighting for human rights, I'm still unable to understand how
some other activists and some other organizations will not fight for gender rights. They're not interested. They're not interested in children's rights. They're not interested in LGBT rights. So it becomes a challenge. I still don't understand. I don't know if any member of the panel can show some of that. And it's a big challenge. So if within the human rights community we have this problem, I mean, what exactly, where are we going? Or what should we be doing? What should we be looking at?
Okay, let me just say that it's easy for you to fight for things that only affect you. So many human rights organizations or people that fight for rights, they only fight for what affects them personally. Let me give you context. During the NSARS protests, for instance, I was holding a placard that said, how many women SARS go rape? And then some men got angry at me in Yaba because they said, why am I talking about rape? I know what we are doing here. I'm like, sorry, what? They're but SARS that stops us on the record of our head. Your concern is limited to what affects you. It doesn't look like you, then it's not your business. What it means to, in the same way, the Joint National Association of People with Disabilities, right? I was speaking with Sexuality, their president now. They have, within the organization, they have biases against women living with disabilities. And I'm like, I don't understand. It's the same way that straight women would ignore queer women when it comes to advocacy. I don't understand. As long as all of us, one woman is within shackles, we are all within shackles. So we need to look beyond. The problem that exists in the circles is that we don't recognize that somebody else's problem intersects with mine and affects mine as well. We just don't think about ourselves alone. As I want to streamline request, we are talking about NSAS now. Let's not bring this one into it. So we need to understand that unless we are free as a people together, everybody's under the same dictatorship of bureaucracy. That's how I see that.
I would also like to say that when we are discussing how to improve our legal systems in the ways that favor women, in the ways that favor queer folks, we need to realize and we need to understand that there exist so many differences, that there are differences that exist within the lives of the women and the people we are fighting for. And we need to address those differences that exist based on maybe their class or their sexuality or their pay grade or whatever it is, because the problems that poor women face in Nigeria will not be the problems that apply to rich women. The problem that lesbian women face will not be the problems that apply to heterosexual women. So there needs to be that it needs to be encompassing, like people that make these laws should know that different needs exist for different categories.
And there's even nuance.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And that can only happen if there are people that look like you on the decision-making bodies making those laws.
Okay, I also wanted to add that, like Barrister Israel said, there's there's a shrinking, like civil society space is shrinking. So today is they make the SSFPA. Tomorrow is NSAS, that SARS is affecting everybody. The day after, they're coming up with, now there's a social media bill that targets everybody. So there's a shrinking civil space, and what we need to do is to do something that is kind of like an intra-advocacy. So everybody's working in their own singular spaces. But we need to actually come together as civil society to actually kind of realize and educate ourselves that once one right is infringed upon, you don't have any guarantees that you're not next. So what we're not doing right now is that intra-advocacy, both as as organizations that work with women and organizations that, even as ourselves, we're not reaching out as much as we should be. So we should be reaching out more to all these other organizations, even if they're not reaching out. So there should be more advocacy, is what I would say.
If I may just add one last point to it. Yeah. I think to answer your question, Barrister, one of the things we forget whilst we're advocating, etc., is ultimately we're all human beings, and each one of us carry with us our fears and insecurities, right? And that fear and insecurity manifests in so many different ways. So when you've got somebody who is saying, I'm about human rights, but I'm not for LGBT rights, look beneath that. There's a fear, there's an insecurity, there's a memory, there's a trauma, there's something that's preventing that, that's not being treated or being spoken, or even the person is afraid themselves to even face it. Sorry, my love? Yeah, what? There's that. But what about women? No, what about women, right? So I'm for human rights, but I'm not for women's rights.
I think that some of the things that we need to be honest about is that the way human rights organizations align themselves, we legitimize bias.
Yes.
I think that we do.
Yes.
And we need to acknowledge that many times when one organization says we're for this but not for that, there is within that a claiming that your struggles are not valid. You know. So when you were talking about intra-advocacy, I thought about that, because how do you want to communicate with somebody who does not recognize your existence or your struggles as valid? And you know, that is a whole other conversation that we are going to have on another day. Because, no, but you're very true.
You're right. I mean, people have their built-in bias and the, subconscious bias and everything. But I do honestly believe that we've got to get beyond just presuming that this person is just biased for the heck of it. There will be a small percentage, but there are also a percentage that can be taught, that can be educated out of their bias.
We're going to end it now, but what I want to say is that we must make sure that we insist in spaces where, whether you have a bias or you are afraid, understand that there is no space for that bias in the work that you're doing.
Zero tolerance. Yes. Whether they tolerate you or not.
Because people are not asking for acceptance. People are saying our rights exist, they must be acknowledged. But this now started getting heated just as the time was ending, unfortunately. But I would like to thank you all for your very clear perspectives. I know we took only one, but I think it was an important question, because many times this is a human rights conversation. I'm sure there are, and I'm really sorry. I would have loved to take more questions, but we do have to move on, and we'll see if we can organize this later. But for now, I'd like to thank our panelists. Ohoju, Miserity, Trauma, and Singapore for their wonderful perspectives. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your thoughts. And you know what? Also, if you have a differing opinion, please post it on the Twitter thread. Challenge, and let's encourage these debates. Let's continue to encourage the conversations. They're not meant to end here. I'm going to have us move very quickly now to, yes please, thank you so much. I'm going to have us move very quickly now to the launch of the 2020 Human Rights Violations Reports by the Director of Human Rights and Advocacy for the Initiative for Equal Rights. And it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to welcome Remy Makinde. Can we give her a round of applause?
Okay, good morning, everybody. That was a very insightful session. Yes, unfortunately, we had to just cut that short. So basically, I'm here to launch the violations reports. We've been doing these violation reports for some time now. If you are not aware of this, please go to our website. The previous editions are there. You can always download to your phones and your laptops. So all agree here that 2020 has been very challenging, right? And what is even more challenging here is that LGTB persons living in Nigeria are forced to be faced with many violations that are not essentially affected by other persons who are not in the queer community. For instance, persons living with HIV would have serious challenges during the lockdown. So we had lockdown for 6 months, and people who needed regular drugs had challenges, accessing them. But beyond medical access, right? One thing that was very common this year is, straight people pretending to be queer and luring other persons just for the purpose of extorting them. This year, we received about 535 violations. 535. Out of this, we have 6 cases on transgender persons and intersex. Trust me, 535 violations is not even the true picture of what is going on in Nigeria. I mean, saying that we have just 6 violations reported on intersex and trans, people is not even close to what is really happening. The idea that, the fact that in the northern Nigeria, for instance, you're considered a vagabond if you cross-dress. Now imagine what would happen to someone who is intersex or who is transgender. What is also interesting to know in this year's violation is that out of the 535 violations that we received, about 300, over 300 was actually done by individuals, right? That is, it is not now the state that is violating the rights of the citizens. This is done by regular people who just feel like they are empowered by the SSNPA, right? Saying, the law says we can punish queer persons. Forgetting that it is a crime to extort money from other persons, or forgetting the fact that it's a crime to blackmail or have a mob attack. Now, like I said, the highest number of violators this year is actually perpetrated by individuals, private persons, family members, and topping that list, we have 89 cases out of the 535 that are on extortion. That is, people lure other persons to, an hangout or their house, and then when you get there, you meet 6 different guys, beat you up, take your phone, dial your family member's number, ask them for ransom to bail you out. And sometimes, even after collecting that money, they would still, rape the person or strip the person naked, take pictures of the person and say, look, we will still post these pictures and share them around. These are the kind of violations that have been received this year. Other things, someone actually talked about forced marriage. That is actually happening as we speak. I can remember one particular case of a lady who was chained up by her father, and the father actually invited other men to rape her in the house. Yes, they raped her repeatedly. It was a neighbor who, intervened and sneaked her out of the house, and that's why she was able to escape. How many more of these violations that we do not even know? And the reason why this is happening is because the government has empowered, individuals to, punish persons because of their perceived sexual orientation. Another case that comes to mind is of a boy who was in his house dancing and recorded the video. It was topless, that is, he wasn't having any shirt on, but he had something down, just his top. and he posted the picture and the video on WhatsApp. His neighbor who saw the video showed other neighbors, and then the next thing is they actually went into his house, dragged him out, beat him up, and told him if he dares to come out that day, they would deal with him. So the SSMP actually, emboldens people to do all sort of things. Ranking after extortion, which is 89, is 80, which is to beat people up. Like a lot of queer persons have been beaten up on a daily basis just because of their perceived sexual orientation. The problem with laws in Nigeria is that they try to give the people what they want, so to speak, right? But not necessarily handling or necessarily identifying the problem and dealing with it. What I mean is this. The SSMPA specifically is for prohibiting same-sex marriage, right? But then it cuts across other things, other fundamental rights, that says your right to assembly peacefully, your right to association. And then the idea that that law is there and it empowers other persons to assume other things. The government has not done anything whatsoever to educate the public on sexual orientation or gender identity, or the fact that there are even sexual characteristics that are different from, what we have regularly. So violations that has to do with cutting of intersex persons are still very much underdocumented. Basically, the reason why we are sharing this document with you today is so that you understand or you have an insight as to what is going on, the challenges faced by queer persons in Nigeria, different violations that we've actually been able to collect. It doesn't mean that this is the entire violation that is occurring. It just helps you to have an insight as to what is going on and the kind of challenges that LGTB persons in Nigeria are faced with. So what do we need you to do with this? Please read these documents, download them, share them with your friends and family, use them as, resources you can share with other persons who do not understand, the violations that queer persons face. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Remy. Please, let's actually do our best to get familiar with some of the statistics and details that are in the reports. There are many things that we have no control of, but fortunately we can control the amount of information, that we can control our access to information, and we can commit to learning, and we can commit to finding out how we can use the information we have to advocate in our own individual circles and do the best that we can. We're going to move very quickly now to our second conversation, which I'm also really looking forward to, because it talks about something that was very, very, very much a part of our online space and our human rights conversation this year, and of course preceding years. We're going to be talking about social media and human rights advocacy. And I know that we all have our thoughts and opinions and perspectives on how that has played out this year and a few years before. I'm looking forward to another really great conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome, first of all, Matthew Blaise. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Matthew is a very passionate advocate of LGBTQ+ rights. Their activism aims to challenge and change the harmful norms and prejudicial views of Nigerians towards sexuality and gender, and to create discussions about sexuality and gender in all the largest media spaces on the continent. And if you know anything about Matthew, you know that this is their mission, and they carry it out with so much heart and so much determination. So can we have another round of applause, please? Next up, I'd like to invite Harry Tie, who is a journalist, social advocate based in Lagos, Nigeria, editor of Love Matters Nigeria, and founder and editor-in-chief of the Rustin Times. It's nice to meet you. Finally, I'd like to welcome Nana Nwachukwu. She has over 13 years experience. Oh yes, let's clap first. Over has 13 years experience working on economic policy and governance issues, and she's developed the ability to synthesize complex data and curate knowledge to inform action. She tweets at the intersection, and she actually works at the intersection of law, politics, and technology. It's so good to have you all on here. I think we're going to have a really great conversation, yes. So, I'm going to start this conversation with a little riddle. Well, not a riddle, but just like a little exercise. And we cannot mention answers, and we cannot mention any individual work that you have done. We just want to set this conversation. We'll start with you, Nana. I want to know for you, and it doesn't have to be this year, what is your most significant online human rights advocacy campaign and why? And then I'll ask the other two.
Any popular ones, right?
That's okay.
Okay,
It's
so,
significant to you.
okay. So for me, it was Save the Gaga.
Okay.
Yes, and it was because back then, mining issues weren't a big deal. And understanding lead poisoning, and it was something that it's not our business, it doesn't concern everybody. There was a minuscule issue, but it kind of took light and ended up in some results that were quite visible, yes.
Fantastic. Harry?
For me, I would say last year, the Love Matters team did a 16 days campaign, 16 activist campaign. And the idea was to tell stories of individuals who had experienced gender-based violence for 16 days. So it was 16 tales for 16 days. So we're telling stories every day. And there was a particular story that we shared about a lesbian who was raped by her cousin because her father sent the cousin, story I can't remember, it was last year, sent the cousin to where she was staying in with her partner, and then raped them, and then even caused a rift in her relationship. She hasn't heard from her partner, and just the responses that came from that conversation and how people responded to it, and the conversations started, on our social media platforms. So I think that was very. I always think of that campaign anytime I think of social media campaigns that were kind of effective.
And you said not your own work.
It wasn't my work per se, yeah.
Matthew, what about you?
Okay, I would say the Androphobia in Nigeria.
Was that your project? Was that your campaign?
Not just my work for.
Okay, but I want something that is outside you, just to start with.
Oh, I will resist.
Okay.
I will resist. That was last year by Walter of Keto Diaries. It highlighted the stories of queer people who were confronting homophobia in their day-to-day life. And it was very personal to me because I was asked to tell my story. It wasn't last 2 years. I was asked to tell my story, but I was scared of telling my story because I wasn't as visible as I am now. So I declined that. And when I saw people telling their stories, it was inspiring to me. And I felt sad because I wasn't able to do that. But seeing myself doing that now is really something that surprises me.
And you do such an incredible job. I'm going to come back to you in a minute. Nana, what would you say are the hallmarks of a successful social media driven or online driven advocacy campaign? What are some of the things that would ring out to you and say this is going well?
So I'm going to start from a little bit of a controversial point. People say that awareness is not success. But for me, awareness is huge success. There are very little issues that we assume people would know, or little things that we assume it's okay. Ignorance, we do it, it's bliss, as some say. and we carry on with that. We treat people poorly because of this. So awareness, having a situation where people know more about the thing is success to me. That's one. Then secondly, amplification, being able to replicate in different places. We, in Nigeria, my thought is that people began to hear or listen more to issues of queer people because they've seen other people from other countries speak about their issues. Countries that are more liberal speak up, and people gain some strength, and they're able to speak up on issues that matter a lot to them. Beyond the amplification, there's also creating a community. So if you're doing a campaign and you're able to find pockets of communities, people who are willing to work on issues offline with you, that's success. I think I'll stop at that. Yes.
Could we have that door closed? Yes, thank you. Matthew, you have driven or been involved in some very, very famous or very notable online campaigns. Can you give us, just name a few of them very quickly for me, then I'll ask you a question.
The Androphobia in Nigeria campaign and the Queer Nigerian Lives Matter campaign.
Okay. Tell me what drove those. I was listening to you just now talking about feeling unable to be involved, and you have come back from that with so much visibility and so much presence. Tell me how you came to say, okay, these are some campaigns and I'm going to drive them, I'm going to get involved, I'm going to be visible, and how those rippled out. What happened, what were the effects, etc.
Okay, I'll start with the Androphobia in Nigeria campaign, which was in February this year. So that campaign came from a very sad place, because the event that led to it wasn't what we should actually, because a lot of people called the campaign a success because of what it achieved after the whole conversation, but the event that led to it wasn't okay at all. It was a sad event, and it still traumatizes me, because a young gay man was killed by homophobes, and there was a video of his body being dug out of where he was buried. And this video went viral with the men confessing that they lured him from his place in Anambra or Imo State to Anambra. From Imo to Anambra, then they killed him there. And the way the confession was, they weren't remorseful at all. It felt like they just did something and they know they would get away with it. So why keep them waiting and all that? And that night, when I saw the video, people weren't talking about it. It wasn't anywhere. It was just in our private queer groups, like 2 groups I belong in. They were sharing the videos and they were just talking internally. So I took the video and I uploaded it on Twitter, and a lot of people started talking about it. But then I did not even think of the hashtag. So the next morning, I remember that 200,000 people have viewed that video, and they started talking about it. That was when my friend reached out and said, Matthew, don't you think we should use an hashtag to push this conversation forward? I thought it was not really a good idea because I really don't know how the stuff works. But when he said it, I said, okay, let's just try it out. And we started pushing it. And before we knew it, it was an avenue for queer people to share their stories. And a lot of queer people started sharing their stories with that hashtag. They began talking about it. From then, it got traction. It became a trend, and that lasted for 2 days. And there was a counter trend that did not even last at all because heterosexuals were being sympathetic with us, and the conversation just went places. So the outcome of that was the event that happened, and the result was, as you said earlier, awareness. Awareness was created. We know how the issue of LGBTQ is in Nigeria, how people are not just interested in it because it's none of their business and they don't care about the minority. But what happened that day was mind-blowing because it went out of proportion and it got into places, got into spaces. It even went into physical spaces. People were asking questions, and it kind of did justice to my advocacy, which is the digital advocacy. And also, the Queer Lives Matter, Queer Nigerian Lives Matter of the NSAS movement, which was the intersectional one, came from a place of, we know how Nigerians are, any issue involving women and queer people, it's none of their business, they don't care about it. Go and sort your issues yourself, not the majority, we don't care about you. So when I went out to protest, I saw that people were carrying different placards. Some were saying, I dye my hair, no be crime. Some were saying, I be prostitute, no be crime. And when I took mine and wrote what I wrote there, someone walked up to me and said, why would I do that? And I'm a person that is fed by anger. And when he asked me that question, I was angry. Did I ask you that question? You wrote this thing on your placard. Did I ask you? Why would you ask me that question? So that was when this anger made me start writing things on different placards. Queer Nigerian Lives Matter, Queer Lives Matter. And I was raising it, I was taking it everywhere. Snap your picture, see me. I want to exist in this space because queer people are affected by SARS. They just profile you as queer if you are effeminate. Then they take you somewhere. It's my lived experience. I've been detained. I've been beaten by SARS people. My friend was beaten at Ajah bus stop. He had bruises all over. Until today, he can't get justice. Even with the whole panel, whatever they are doing, we can't still get justice. Then there was a need to make the movement intersectional because if we are not talking about our issues, then how would you see us? How? So from there, the conversation left because the intersectionality started on the physical ground. Started with a video that went viral of me shouting Queer Lives Matter, and it went into the online space, and this conversation just blew. And a lot of people started talking about the Queer Nigerian Lives Matter in the NSAS movement, and queer people were included in the whole conversation at last.
You know that. When Matthew talked about the friend who still hasn't found justice, even with the judicial panel, didn't it make you think of just this panel that we've concluded about the many layers that exist in accessing legal services, in accessing justice? That really struck me very strongly. Harry, we're seeing this proliferation of campaigns that no matter what it is, somebody wants to raise a conversation about, it's becoming easier and easier to start a hashtag, to gain that amplification, gain an audience. What do you think is driving this is the power of these campaigns? What do you think is driving our familiarity, our ease of turning to social media as a tool for advocacy, or online tool for advocacy?
I think
have to hold it.
I think that queer people generally have found solace online, right? So even just before we became more, more outspoken, more resilient, with how we tweet and what we talk about, we have found spaces. We found this space in the digital space, right? So even just looking for love in general, right? You first go online first to find someone who you actually like. And so now starting to live and starting to experience homophobia in your daily lives, or the subtle ones that's thrown by family, by friends in your workplace, having to now exist in a space that doesn't see you as valid, that doesn't see you as complete. It gets to a point where it's like they've pushed you to the wall so much that there's nowhere to go to again. All you have to do is push back, right? And so that's the space that we are in. That's the era that we're living in. And that's why we're seeing a lot more people bust out their frustrations online, because that's the only safe space that they have. They know that, a lot of people know that, they may not have the courage, in quotes for lack of a better word, to step out on the streets and carry a sign. But they know that in their digital space, their voice is loud, their voice can be heard, people can amplify their voices. And so, they tend to use that avenue to speak about the issues that are facing them. And so that's why, just even 2 years ago, in 2018, the conversations were not this intense, right? We're not even speaking out. Let's not even go so far last year, right? We're not really speaking out the way we're speaking out now. And as the year goes on, we see that people are getting frustrated, people are getting tired, tired of status quo, tired of having to live your life like, it's not yours, right? People are getting to spaces in their lives where it's like, if you want to kill me, then just kill me now. And so that is why advocacy now is powerful, digital advocacy is powerful, and it has impact. Just to borrow on Matthew Blaise's Queer Lives Matter campaign, people saw the video. So say the video dropped on, say, a Monday, right? There's a video of Matthew Blaise shouting Queer Lives Matter on the road, and then by Friday you had more queer people out at the protest. That's the power of digital advocacy, right? And that's why when people say, it's just online advocacy, but online advocacy is actually offline advocacy, because you're strategizing offline, you're going offline. He was at the protest, and now we saw a lot more queer people go out to the protest and fight back. Even when they said, you can't protest, now is not the time. And even moving past that, even to when there was the conversation online about if queer people should be in the protest, and we saw queer people fighting back. And so that is the space that we're in the space that, you've done your worst, you've marginalized us for so long, now it's time for us to push back, and that's the era that we're in.
Matthew, your pronouns are there, right? Okay. Then I want to talk about the Gbv State of Emergency. Can you give me your perspectives on that campaign?
Largely I would say that it took off when the UN Women released a report that over 495 people, reported cases of sexual assault during the lockdown. So it was, and then the states were refusing to sign the draft act. And like this report that we just received now, one of the things that we started looking at is there's a lockdown. Women are going to be in very unsafe spaces. And around that time also, we're looking at how the police was reacting to issues of... I recall some years ago, we were at an event where the police gender person was there, and one of the first things she said, happily seated on a panel like this, was, but she was wearing short skirts now, or stuff like that. Yeah. So at that point, we're remembering some of these things where we've heard them talk about how to react to this issue, and we know that there's no way these people are going to be reacting to issues of women being assaulted in places that they no longer find safe. And I did say that work or going outside the home was safety for a lot of people. But straight women, queer women, it was safety for them, and now they're going to be locked in with abusers. What do we do? How do we ensure that in the different states, where these women are, they're able to find some form of justice. So that was what kind of led Chioma Chuka, especially, to start the conversation about state of emergency of gender-based violence in Nigeria. After that took off, we used social media a lot. Sorry, my glasses are steaming badly, so I'm trying to see.
Sorry.
So after it took off, we started using social media. Everybody was on lockdown anyway, so there's really nothing. So engaging and trying to embarrass the government, of course, the airlines disgrace, trying to build allies across places. And actually, I think one of the biggest things was also making sure that when we say women, we mean all women. We're talking about poor women, women living with disabilities, different, and that for women living with disabilities, even worse, like spaces for them sometimes don't exist. How's the woman who can't see, able to deal? How's the woman who can't hear, who can't walk up a flight of stairs? Police stations have stairs, have unaccessible places. How are we even going to do this? What are you people putting in place? So taking to task our first ladies in quote, to pressure them into doing something. Sex offenders register, where is it? Where are these people living? How do we know? I remember one of the things that NAPTIP did there was the most disgraceful thing ever, even though that they were applauded as, oh yeah, you've done something good. Sorry, I just realized I'm just sorry. So NAPTIP kind of copied 3 names from Ekiti State, and 1 name of somebody, I'm sure maybe the person is dead by now, and published it and said, these 4 people are the registered sex offenders in Nigeria. And everyone was, yes, they've launched a sex offenders. What? Am I the only one who is seeing this thing, or why is everybody clapping? So we decided, you know what, every state is going to have this thing. Let us pressure for this. Let us make sure that they're all implementing the VAP Act, getting the state legislators to pass the bill for the VAP Act in their states and all that, and domesticate it. And so far, I think about 24 states, have domesticated the VAP Act, and the campaign was largely driven by online activism, pushing it through there, then taking the action offline, taking information that's come from offline, putting it back online, and trying to see how this is going to impact on everyone. But I regret to say that despite the domestication, we really cannot say in reality that this is what it has done for women. We really can't say. There's currently no data. I'm looking at this thing now, 535 violations. And we know that this is probably like, very, very tiny, itty-bitty. If we start talking about women who can't come out to say we've been violated, or women who, I think I mentioned this to Azina sometime, I said that there are poor women who are being violated by their partners. Who are they going to go to? So some of these things are not captured by these reports. So as much as I want to say it's going great, the documentation, the legislative part of it is going great. I'm not sure that the implementation, the actual result part of it, I really can't say it's working out great. But if the legislation is properly, put in place, perhaps we would use the same approach and see what we can do about implementation.
I think that this is, for me, one of the things that makes our online advocacy so difficult. The fact that when you've done all this work and gained all this traction, you then cannot guarantee that it will be followed through by the people whose responsibility it is to follow through. There is also the fact that you might run a successful campaign and then, your government will decide to punish you for agitating for your rights. For this panel, we hope to get
some of us. Yes. I tell you.
We hope to get an NSAS, one of the people that worked with NSAS. And first, you have to ask yourself, am I willing to put them under this kind of microscope to maybe if it's somebody who's managed to evade the radar, are we willing to put them to such risk?
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking that you have to think like that. And Harry, that makes me ask, how do we function in these online spaces, which are supposed to be our safe spaces, but which now we're seeing that you can be doing this activism and your passport is seized, or your bank accounts are frozen, or state agents are looking for you.
the next step? Where do we go?
That's a very interesting question because there's nowhere to go. We have to keep doing what we're doing. I know it will be nice if we, and that's what advocacy is, right? There are risks involved, and that's the risk involved. It's either we do it or we die. What's the option? What's the alternative, right? If we are not open and speaking about our stories, if we're not telling about our lived realities, what other option do we have? You know, and I know sometimes we can do it and get away with it. Sometimes it will come with sanctions. It will come with risks. It will come with and sometimes these things are not even a function of. It may never be a state-sanctioned risk. It might be in your personal lives, right? In your you could lose your home. You could lose where you live. You could lose your job. You could lose. There are different layers to consequences of being very vocal, of speaking out against injustices. And so it's unfortunate, but we have to do it because what's the other option? You know, there's nothing else you can do. It's either you fight, you speak out, or you die on the inside. You know, it's like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You know, what are you gonna do?
Sorry, I just wanted to also add something. You know, when you said the government, sometimes the risks don't just come from only the government. In civil society spaces, I've seen where if you're advocating for human rights for all, people who would say to you, leave this queer people, we're talking about, there are people who do that. And beyond that, even when you're talking about Me Too movement, when you start talking about the sexual abuse in the civil society space, they'll say, there is something, it's not everything that you talk about, let's focus on this thing. And the people who have dared, talking about the state of emergency, it had snowballed into different things, where we're slowly trying to catch some of these people saying, you that you think human rights is not for all, you that is abusing women, and slowly the reaction for the past few weeks has been horrible. The reaction, it will shock you, and it's not coming from the government. So when we are looking for safe spaces, sometimes the only safe space you have is in your head. That's the truth.
Wow. I needed a moment to think about that. Matthew, I have been online and seen you resist people's efforts to silence you. I don't know if many people have an idea of the extent to which you probably have to deal with threats because of your visibility, and like Harris, you just keep speaking. How do you deal with things like that? And I'm saying that for us to be able to expand that conversation to people who are committing to being visible and audible in online spaces. How does one develop the tools? What tools do you take to protect yourself, to protect your spirit?
Okay, I think this is personal. Like for different people, you develop different tools for yourself. It's very personal. And for me, as I said earlier, I'm fueled by anger, and this anger blindfolds me. And whenever I am doing whatever I am doing, I think about this anger and I keep going. And when these trolls come, because they're mostly internet trolls, and when they come, I just find a way to navigate them with this anger, push them aside, then wait for the consequences. So it's crazy because some of them are not just by mouth, because they go way beyond that. You see these people coming to your physical space to attack you. You see them going to any length just to have you stop talking about what you're talking about. You see them even threatening to kill you. So for me, how I protect myself is by being angry, always. And when you come, I show you that I am angry. Then I go inside my house. I go inside, I think Alexander understands this because I put up this, yes, I'm always putting up the angry face outside, but whenever I come inside, I start unpacking all these things. The insults, I start unpacking them and I start trying to process everything that is really going on. But at the end of the processing, it still goes back to the anger. Why do I have to go through this? Why should you dictate what I should do or what I should say, when I should say them, how I should say them? I ask myself these questions and we move on the next day.
I'm not going to say you make it sound easy because you don't, but I know that the toll that it must take is again a conversation for another day, but we see your work, Matthew. I want to talk a little bit about NSAS because I think that was, truly revolutionary in how it's captured everyone and how everybody had a role to play. So I'm just going to ask us very quickly your personal perspectives on what for you made it so successful. Why was it so significant? What was the thing about it for you?
For me, I would say that it was a common goal and a shared anger. I don't think there's anybody, rich, poor, straight, crime, I don't think there's anybody, old, young, poor, everybody is affected by police brutality and in different forms, Even people who are protected by police is affected by police brutality from another policeman. Even the policemen themselves are affected by their colleagues' brutality. So it was general. Everybody feels the madness of that, defunct and useless system. I think that's what pushed it. Then secondly, it was also the leaderless take. It gave people a lot of ownership. So you want to cook, sit down and start cooking for the movement. You want to shout, sit down and start shouting for the movement. You want to raise money, go and start raising whatever you want to do or you need to do. You didn't need permission from anybody to do anything. There was no one saying you're in our group, you're not in the, like Matthew was saying, he went out with his own campaign, and when people tried to harass him for it, he pushed back. Do you understand? So it's like, I'm in my space, I'm doing my thing because this is how this thing is affecting me. So for me, that was one of the biggest factors that contributed to his success.
I think I'll say what I really loved about the protest, and I think for me it was seeing queer people find their voice in ways that I never imagined I would see, at least not now. Seeing people come out in their droves, seeing people defending queer people being harassed online and offline, it just gave me hope, and it was very inspiring to see very young people, young people, a lot of them under the age of 25, taking ownership and saying that I refuse to be harassed, I refuse to go through this form of intimidation anymore. And it was, in a way, it was sort of a fight against the system, and not just even police brutality. It's like, we're going to push back, for all the years of harassment from the state, for all the times that, you have put us down, we're going to stand up for ourselves. That was very inspiring for me. Yeah.
As Ellie said, it was about the intersectionality of the movement and how queer people insisted on their rights to protest as queer people. So that was the beauty of it for me, that I could go out there and shout, and when you try to attack me, someone comes from my side to say, why would you attack him, and why would you want to do this? Stay your lane, let him stay his lane. Then we continue the conversation. And how this conversation did not just stop in Lagos. It went to places where I wouldn't dare carry my Queer Lives Matter back. It was in Ilorin, it was in Abuja, it was in even the northern states and every part of Nigeria where this protest was held. So it was so beautiful to see this and seeing how queer people are taking up spaces that are not even given to them, how they are dragging it. It's so much beauty for me, and it is the success of the protest for me.
And how can we utilize effectively digital tools in driving online advocacy?
For me, I'll say storytelling, one. It's very important. I think this is a proverb, I'm not so sure where it comes from, but it says something like, if you don't tell your story or tell what happened to you, people will kill you and say you enjoyed it. So it's important to tell your story in your own way, documentation, in whatever way. For instance, one of the things I like about Love Matters is that it's a forum. So there's this space for discussion, it provides documentation without even intending to, I don't know if that was the intention, but it provides documentation without intending to. There's so much that we miss out from not curating things. So that's one big tool that we can use. On the other hand, also, activism needs to be fueled. So there's fundraising tools that will help you keep it alive, so to speak. Finding money to do the little things that no other person will give you money for, maybe because of discrimination or because of any other thing. So being able to source that from beyond the jurisdiction of Nigeria is something that's beautiful. And also building little communities. Building communities is another way to amplify anything that you need. It helps keep the cause alive because at some point, either you've moved on to other things or, something could have happened. So it keeps hope alive, so to speak. So these are things that we can, put in place in little bits, either knowingly or allowing it to grow organically to be able to keep online activity alive. And also, take it offline. So if you've documented something, chances that it will go offline is there. It will be picked up by mainstream media, radio, TV, newspapers, and the rest of them, because that's where they come to source for news. So those are tools that I feel that we can rest on if we want to do this.
When you talk about that and we talk about taking it offline, I'm also thinking about what we said earlier on about state of emergency and how it had so much power online and then offline again, the implementation. And it makes me think, Harry, about, I don't know, should we be content with creating outcomes online? How do we manage our expectations that when we have started these movements, because in other circumstances, you would then expect that momentum to be carried and for structures to be put in place and so on. But what if that is not the case in our situation? Do you think it's okay for us to say, okay, we've raised awareness, we have the stories, we've handed it over, or is there more that you would like to see happen?
I like to say I'm a bit of a realist. It's a little bit too much. So I don't really. So for example, we did a documentary at Western Times called Defiance, right? And thank you. We had amazing people on the documentary. But one thing that struck me was when I had consulted people who were going to be on the documentary, for example, so Matthew, Miriam, and the rest of everybody on the documentary, I specifically told them that it was going to be a very small thing, and that go to put it on YouTube, maybe we'll get like 300 views, right? But the way the momentum went and the engagement I got from people who were not even queer, telling me, so this is what happens. It's very odd that people need to actually show you that people are actually going through issues before you know that people are actually going through issues. It can be very frustrating. But at the same time, it was very interesting to see people respond in that way and say that, I didn't know this was going on. This person's story got to me. say, oh, I saw myself, you know, even though I'm not queer, I saw myself in this person, and I have empathy towards them. And I feel like that is the space that we're in our history, you know, of organizing as queer people. We are in the space of changing hearts and minds, of getting allies, right? With our storytelling, like she had mentioned earlier. That's the space that we're in, and I'm very happy that we are doing that gradually. We're seeing, and it's not just, you know, with maybe foreign media, but even with local media in Nigeria, we're seeing how the stories that we're telling are reaching across the aisle. And we're seeing non-queer people starting to understand queerness, right? They may not get it right at first, but they are learning, right? And for me, that's the space that we're in. If we can get more non-queer people to understand the realities, and I know that sometimes it's very debatable, right? And people have different opinions about it, and it's very valid. But I feel like if we can get...
Does anybody else have? If we see our top 3 people, then we can just ask all of them at once. People cannot tell me that only one person has questions. What's your handle? I'm trying to find it. But the first, I mean, like, first of all, before we go any further, Ellen, what's your handle?
On Twitter.
Yes,
okay,
please.
Blaise_21.
There you go. Right. Blaise_21. 21. Right. I've just seen you smile. This was going to be my question. We take these things for granted. And much as this thing cover our face, we smile with our eyes. And since you got up there, I've been very, very worried about you that your eyes were not smiling. And I wanted to ask, where do you turn to for help? I'm glad you're smiling. This is the mother in me, you see. I can't help it.
Okay, I think I turn to myself.
Azina. Oh. Okay.
No, yes.
Go there.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll continue.
Go ahead.
We'll continue. Can we ask okay, give me one mic and then, can we just ask the other 2 back to back? And then you can say who your question is directed to.
Hi, my question is actually quite similar to the question that was just asked, but it was more along the lines of, as community organizers, as activists, as people who are trying to create, spaces where we are able to be safe, what advice do you have in terms of doing that in a way that's mutually supporting each other? And also how can we support outside of money, but in a more tangible way? What do you need, and what do you think you would advise other people who are doing similar work? That's my question.
Yes, let's ask the last question. How can you take the question about let's take the last question.
Sure, mine is not a question, it's rather a statement of hope. I think for all of us. I'm sorry, I don't remember any. I was going to look up on Tears page on Instagram, so I don't have to ask you. But you made mention of something about how our activism online doesn't seem to translate, like how we take it to the street, and I don't think that's true. It's basically the human proclivity to think that if it's not going as fast as I think it should, like if I want something to be done tomorrow and it takes me 3 days to do it, I failed. I think we need to remind ourselves where we were and where we are at the moment. And I say this because just the other day I was doing research on something I needed to work on, and I made comparisons of where we were statistically about the perception of Nigerians towards queer people, and it has changed so much from just 2015 to now. It's not fast enough. We feel that it's not fast enough. But if you were to ask the the homophobic person that changed in 3 years. What happened? It will be like, wow, I'm really shocked. Like just 3 years ago, I could kill somebody, but now I have 2 friends who are queer and we're so great together. So we need to remind ourselves of these things. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. I do know that she was speaking to a specific campaign. And but yes, your point about also being patient with the journey and allowing it to take time, or not allowing it to take time, but being patient with the journey is a very good one. Thank you. Harry, would you like to talk about community support and so
on? I think very practical ways to support, like I said earlier on, is to give, if you have funds, if you have financial means. I feel like money is very powerful in the world that we're in. So if you have funds for grassroots organizations who are going to the inner cities, the villages, you can also give. I feel like just even words of encouragement on social media helps. I see what you're doing. And I feel like there's something that happens with people who are very people who are visible and are out there. I feel like community members try to keep how they do their advocacy and say, oh, you're speaking too loud, or you're being too femme, or you're being too masked, or you're saying this. There's always some form of gatekeeping from community members on how they should do advocacy. And I feel like they shouldn't let people advocate however they feel. If someone is angry all the time, it's just because Nigeria gives you reason to be angry all the time. So I feel like we need to give room for individuals to do advocacy how they feel, how they see fit. Because in the end, advocacy is very personal. It comes from a very personal space. And we need to give them room to be in that space. And we also need to give activists and advocates, room to be human and to live their human experiences. And to understand that even though they are out there doing incredible work, they're still human beings who have to live and love and just exist like every other person. So let's give them room for that. But like I said, there's money, there's financial gains, there's support their work. If they say, oh, I have this book out, buy the book. If they say, oh, we're having an event, show up for the event. If they put out a tweet, retweet the tweet, right? Amplify their voices. And then just be there for them when they need someone to talk to. Just be there, be available. I hope that answers your question.
We have time for one more question. One more. Okay. All right then. So in that case, I will ask. I'm going to ask. Okay. We have 3 minutes. So Matthew, I'm going to ask you one question, and then I'm going to ask you the last question. Matthew, should we look for when we're thinking about growth and evolution of online advocacy? What would you like to see happening that would tell you that there's growth in the space of the people who are being advocates and also in the ones who are the audience or the ones who are engaging?
Okay, I would like to see more campaigns, more online campaigns, and more online spaces that can go into offline spaces. So that would be good for me, seeing different queer people take up leadership, not just for a certain people. Leadership for me is actually for all of us. So we come up with initiatives, get our community together, get our networks, then push these initiatives from the online realm to the offline realms. I feel if we have these niches, we'll be able to go into a big and stronger community, then come together to push for the change we want.
Fantastic. Nana, when we're thinking about, I'm sure there's so many people here who would like to know, what would you say are best practices for somebody who's thinking about starting a campaign, or somebody who's looking to get more involved in online advocacy, online human rights advocacy, or advocacy of any kind? What are some things to think about?
First step, start it. That's one thing. First step, put out the post, the tweet, whatever, before you start the big planning. Just do it. Then secondly, hashtagging. Hashtags have gone beyond just being things of fun to being curation tools, so it's important. Then the next thing, make sure you include other people who you know in your offline world, bring them online. Make sure that in doing that, you also try to insist on your message, no matter, because you need to make up your mind, I'm doing this no matter the bullying, no matter the other opinion, except the opinions are coming in from places of advice, good advice, encouragement, and then you're sieving through, so that's one thing. Then build your timeline, because more often than not, I'm big on documentation, so whenever I talk about documentation. Twitter will only store hashtags for 7 days and all that. So if you're someone who wants to curate, you can use free tools like tags and the rest of them to curate. Start running it from the first day, start running your tags. So you'll be able to build a timeline of things that have happened. If people have supported, you're able to see it. If people have disagreed, you're able to see it, to tell why they're disagreeing and all that. So documentation is very key for me, building your timeline. Then amplify, start begging for amplification if you need to beg. Let your anger amplify it if your anger will work. Make sure it goes into places where people who should take action will be embarrassed. So if it goes there, at least you're sure of something. And hope and pray that the people who are embarrassed will take a negative action against you. Because to be honest, more often than not, when the government agrees with you immediately, you need to take a step back and be like, okay, what are we doing wrong? Do you understand? So when they disagree with you and when there's some movement towards what you're doing, then you know that, okay, this is getting to a good place. So that's basically all of it.
Can we have a round of applause? I'd like to thank you all, Nana, Harry, and Matthew, not just for your presence here on the panel, but for the work you do online, for your constant advocacy, for being audible and visible, and we are recognizing and acknowledging here that it's not all love and light. The toll it takes is heavy. And I think that we all have a part to play in being present and being available as support for each other, even as we continue the work that we're doing. So thank you very much. All right. It's now time for we're actually we're rounding up now. So this was our last panel, and it's time for our closing remarks. So I would like to welcome once again the Executive Director, the Initiative for Equal Rights, Zina Mohammed, for her closing comments.
Hello again, everyone. Thank you for sticking by us for this long. I would like to do this very quickly and not get in the way of everybody's item 7. So first off, just thank you to the entire TIERS team for putting this together despite the pandemic and for the continuous work of connecting violations every day of the year and listening into people's problems. So please give a round of applause for them. And to our wonderful partners who continue to collect violations reports with us, who continue to have actions and support available to community members all through the country, all through the year. Partners like Keto Diaries, Increase, ICA, Women's Health and Equal Rights, IAH. So thank you very much to those who continue to do the work despite all of the hardships. And fundamentally, as we can see, even though violations are hard conversations to be had, they are necessary conversations to be had. This came from the government denying that there was any kind of violations based on people's real or perceived sexual orientation and gender identity. So we had to step in as queer people to start documenting our pain and saying, here it is. This is exactly the date and the place and where it happened, and you need to take notice of it. Since then, we've made some progress to the point where the National Human Rights Commission is now beginning to document real or perceived violence done to queer people. So please, if something happens, whether to you or a friend or someone that you know, please ensure that it's reported to a queer organization or to the National Human Rights Commission. This tells a story. This is what our friends and our family can use to defend themselves when we're being written out of history or even out of the present. So thank you very much for all the work that you do individually. Let's continue to hold space for each other. I know that Matthew is curating a queer Christmas this year. Please holler at him if you don't have family. And please just reach out to people, open up, we're all we've got. Thank you very much and God bless.
If you have your tickets, your snack or drink tickets. Oh, they didn't give you. Hey, sorry. I have my own. Unfortunately. But okay. I'm going to just remind us all that even in our going out, I believe that there is a snack station set up and so on outside. Please remember to practice social distancing. Please, do your best to keep yourself and others safe. Thank you so much for your attention, for your investment, for those who spoke so eloquently and so clearly. And I think at this time, I can say that we have closed.